Good evening. This is Talking Devils, the United Way tactics podcast that we'll be doing for this season. I'm joined by Tony Bryson of Bryson Analysis and Mike Pieri. Well, here we go. We're going to talk about one thing, Ruben Amorim's system, the system that seems to have confuddled and confounded every pundit and every spectator and commentator in football. We just don't know what he's doing, or do we? Well, we'll attempt to have a conversation about that and see where we land. Just an introduction to the guys, see how you're doing as well. Tony, tell us a little bit about yourself, your first time on the pod. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're doing.
First of all, Wayne, thanks for having us on. It's nice to be here. My name is Tony Bryson. I am a football coach and football analyst, currently working for Greenock Morton Football Club in the Scottish Championship. Big Manchester United fan, have been for a long time, and I love looking at the way teams play and the things that they do, and trying to figure out the whats and the whys. So,
well, that should help us. And Mike, everyone should know you watches this Del Pieri on socials, but for the uneducated and classless amongst us, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi guys. Again, not nice to be on. Well, I not to the level that Tony's at, but I've been coaching for 30 years. I sort of gave up coaching at grassroots level a couple of years ago. It was youth football, and then I've become a referee. Done some podcasting in the past, and done some things with you, Wayne, with looking at your books. Love reading about the game, watching the game, playing the game, reading about the game, writing about the game. So yeah, football's a big thing, but the coaching and the tactical side is something I'm really interested in. So really excited to be with you, Wayne, and obviously with you, Tony.
Brilliant. All right, so I'm going to kick it off with a point that Tony brought up. I've missed the article. I've not seen this, but there's an article on BBC website. So, funny thing, when I was writing Football Told by Matt Busby, hopefully people are aware what I'm talking about, my most recent book, it's a look into United's tactical and ideological history. Well, it was finished. It was finished earlier, but I was updating it as the more recent managers were hired and fired. And it was the final draft of it was completed just as Eric Ten Hag was sacked and Ruben Amorim was brought in, and he was bringing in this massively different system or formation, at least, which United haven't traditionally played. And so my concern was, or at least my concern, it wasn't really a concern because I felt that the theory of the book was solid, so I wasn't really bothered about it. But it was based around the idea that United have their own set of values and principles that every manager who comes in has to adhere to, and that the most common denominator in terms of success and formations was that the formations mirrored the most popular formation of the day. We've only really seen a couple of times in history a manager come in and try to impose their own system on United, a tactical shift. The first time really was Louis van Gaal when he brought in the three-man defence, and he persistently tried with that, infamously abandoned it after 45 minutes of his first game, but then he kept trying to return to it. We all remember Jose Mourinho throwing the toys out of the pram when he couldn't get his defender, so he started playing Ander Herrera and Scott McTominay in there, but that was less of a holistic departure from what United are used to. But then obviously we good for Ruben Amorim, and then there was this steadfast adherence to three-man defence, and we've talked all last season about it. We were saying it doesn't seem fit the squad that we've got, and all kinds of different theories for why that was happening. But that leads us to present day and why we're doing these shows and conversations. So, Tony, if you want to kick off by telling us about the introduction to this show is going to be why this system for Amorim. If you tell us about the BBC article as well within that, and then we can get started talking about it.
Yeah, so there seems to be a kind of journalistic, almost like falling over themselves to find some sort of problem that Amorim's system will never work at Manchester United. It will never fit. And we see that Danny Murphy mentioned it on Match of the Day a couple of times. It's not going to work here. I think his words were, it won't work in England, or something to that effect. And Patton Evans put one out today on BBC Sports website saying that, asking, is Amorim behind the times? Because he seems to be wanting to get rid of wingers and not have wingers. And obviously, Patton Evans was a famously very high-level winger for Chelsea and for Scotland. So he's put an article out today. Is Amorim behind the times? Because everybody else seems to be trying to sign wingers, whilst he is trying to get rid of wingers. And I think, from a system standpoint and a tactical standpoint, that's a bit disingenuous, because if you take that at face value, it's almost as if Manchester United are just going to play with all 10 outfield players playing right down the middle of the pitch, and they're never going to try and do anything down the sides, which is obviously not the case. So hopefully, and I do wee videos and little clips and things like that. You can view them on my X page, Bryson Analysis. You can have a wee look at them, where I try and break it down. Now, I'm quite old-fashioned because I brought up with my dad. So X or Twitter tacticals will talk about 6s, 8s and 10s and inverted wingers and things like that. I probably won't talk in those terms. But you'll see for the clips that we talk about, the screen grabs that we used today, what we're kind of talking about with this, creating width, but also having overloads in the middle of the pitch, which is what Amorim's whole thing is based on, controlling the central areas of the pitch by having more numbers than the opposition.
Yeah, Mike, interesting thoughts. That the key word that you get from those articles is outdated, right? But how can a three-man defense be outdated? It can fail, but it's definitely not behind the times as far as the Premier League is concerned, right? It's not like an evolution skipped us by. We never moved to a three-man defense for a long period of time, did we? And I'm not talking about United. I know that there were systems at Chelsea came when Conte, there was a shift to three-man defenses, but it wasn't like it was a big cultural shift within football. A couple of teams tried it, but this is the first time. I mean, apart from Conte doing it, it's a manager going into another top club and trying it. And to suggest it's sort of like outdated seems a bit strange. It might not stick, but that's a different concept altogether, right?
I mean, the spotlight's always going to be on a club like United. We know that. I think rather than being outdated, it's probably something which is almost unique, as you say, in terms of an approach. I mean, I'd like to ask Tony that, and I like Patton Evans. I think I've got a lot of time for Patton Evans. When he talks about wingers, is he talking about wingers from his day or wingers in the modern era? Because wingers in the modern era are very, very different, aren't they? We don't play with two up top like when he played at Chelsea. Tend to play with just one up top. Most teams, even if they're a 4-3-3 or a 3-4-3. So the wingers are more wide forwards now, aren't they? Rather than the old 4-4-2. Sharp or Giggs and Kanchelskis on one side tradition. So I would bounce that back and ask Tony, is that what Patton Evans was talking about, rather than the modern view of a winger and the modern view of, and you intimated to that, and how Amorim will try to move the ball to the wide areas, not necessarily a flying winger like Kanchelskis or Giggs, but getting the ball out wide to a wide player. May not necessarily be a winger in the traditional sense, but it's still wing play. So not a winger, but wing play, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's exactly my next point on that would be that we're still playing with players on the wings. We're still trying to work the ball into wide areas, which if you look at some of the clips from the Bournemouth game, you'll see Ahmad coming inside the pitch and playing almost as like a kind of attacking midfielder role, but he's come off as playing as a wing back, or he's come in from the wide area and allowed the overlap from his wing back. So I think, as I said, I like Patton Evans, great player, great pundit, and in Scotland we've seen a lot more of Patton Evans as a pundit than perhaps other parts of the UK have seen, because he was on sports scene and things up there when I was growing up. So yeah, I just think it's probably, for him, it's the kind of gigs, gigs, running, beating your man, getting to the byline, crossing the ball type winger that he's talking about. And he's right, Mike. He's right. This system doesn't have those players. But that doesn't mean that he's old-fashioned or he's behind the curve. If anything, he's doing something that's a wee bit different to what's been done here before. But as Wayne alluded to, Antonio Conte won the Premier League playing a similar system. And if you remember, Victor Moses turned into a world beater in that system, and he wasn't a fullback. He probably was more of a winger than a fullback, definitely, and he turned him into somebody who had a big impact. So, I just think perhaps it's just say something about Manchester United so everybody comes to look at it. But that's the horrible cynic in me that thinks that. But he's right. We don't have traditional wingers in this system, or Amorim doesn't play with them. But there's certainly a lot of stuff happens down the sides.
All right. Tony, if you want to tell us, we said at the top of that, just before we introduced the point about Nevin and the BBC article, why this system for Amorim. If you want to tell me while you're going along, if you want me to pop up any of the screen grabs to illustrate the point. But tell us why this system for Ruben Amorim.
So essentially it's about control of the game and control of the possession of the ball. So in the system, and if you go to the first screen grab, where you can see, forgive me for that being a wee bit fuzzy. I don't know if that's just my screen. You can see he's kind of back three. He's three central defenders and he's two midfielders in front, and that creates a five in the middle. This is something we see across high level of football. It's a 5 and a 5. So 5 helping to progress the ball, or what you'll hear a lot now is the build phase or build up. So that's where you're trying to create the opportunity to go forward. But you also see this front line of 5 players. So in Amorim's system, he is trying to overload the starting phase of the game when he's trying to progress the ball by having more players in central areas than the opposition. It's really that simple. So here we have a 5v2. So Manchester United could just pop the ball around those two until someone else from the opposition jumps in and tries to go and make it a 5v3 or tries to win the ball. And at that point, what you'll then have is you'll have more numbers up the pitch, and that's when you progress the ball forward. So ultimately, that's what our Amorim's trying to do, is control the central areas of the pitch and force the opposition team to allow us an opportunity to play forward. And that, in simple terms, that's it. In this screenshot, the far away man is the wing back. So there's your winger. That's a traditional winger's position he's in right now. Even though he's not in the system on paper before the game as a winger, everybody recognises that position between the other team's midfield and defence out on the wing as a winger. So the opportunity to progress to him or the player on the opposite side is essentially creating the opportunity for wing play, 1v1s down the side, the opportunity to make runs from the midfield to help that player. And as I say at the bottom there, penetrating runs and stretching the game. The 5 that stay away from the ball when that's happening are essentially there to keep the opposition's back 4 or back 5 or whatever they play with as far away from the ball as possible. That's why they're there, to allow space to move and circulate the ball. So, in a nutshell, that's what Amorim is trying to do. And the reason he's doing it suits Manchester United the way they want to be. Because if you remember, a lot of the conversations around Ten Hag was that there's no real style here. We don't know what they're going to do. We don't know what they work on all week. So they went and found the most up-and-coming young European coach at the time, which is what Amorim was. And they wanted a systems-based coach. Because if you think of Guardiola, De Zerbi, Xavi, even Inzaghi at Inter Milan, Conte is probably the biggest systems coach or the most successful systems coach. And basically all that means is he has a set way he wants his team to play, and he won't deviate from it. So we wanted as a club, or that's certainly what they were thing in the media about. We want a systems coach. We want a Man United way of playing. We want to create a new, modern, possession dominant, attacking, exciting Manchester United identity, where you could swap the shirts and still know which team was the Manchester United team. So fundamentally, that's it, and that's probably not in a nutshell, because I'm aware quite a lot of talking there, but in my opinion, that's where it would be, or that's why this system.
No, it's an interesting point. I mean, I always go back to the fact that you do have common systems in football, and it's more a case of football evolves and every team adopts the same systems. Then the coaches kind of try and work out the manipulations within that. Obviously, the success of any system from a great manager is the intelligence of which they create those overloads. That's been the same ever since the Hungary-England game. That's been the same principle. It's about where you find those areas on the pitch to create the overloads. And the successful generational aspect of that is that a manager finds a way of doing it that is quicker to the mark than other managers. And it can have a generational shift, like Guardiola has done. He brought it way back to the goalkeeper and overloading, and he wasn't doing that at Barcelona at first, but he's done it when he's been able to manipulate the best resources and the best players, because it makes it easier to win. It's not too dissimilar a negative tactic from the likes employed by Benitez and Mourinho, just that they didn't always have the best players to do it. Not that I'm digging out Guardiola there. I'm just making a point about the tactical evolution, and it's like, all right, well, this is what you do within it. So it is kind of brave for a manager to come in and go like, all right, I'm at one of the biggest clubs in the world. I'm going to try something different. And it did. I mean, look, it bombed repeatedly over the course of last season, especially when you look at results and performances, even though you could look at certain performances and go, all right, this is within the performance. Now, what do you think, Mike? I mean, as someone who's coached for such a long time, do you look for that evolutionary part of it? Do you look at a rival who's evolutionary, who tries something a bit different, and you think, do you know what, I respect what he's done there? Or are you more like of a traditionalist, where we say, all right, we've evolved with the times, everyone plays a 4-2-3-1, or whatever the case may be, 4-3-3. You know what I mean? How that shifted over the last 25 years, and you go, all right, well, we just find a new way to be dynamic within the, try and be more dynamic than the other coach within that new system, in order to make sure that you're stable to play against everyone, rather than, the biggest successes United had playing that system last season were most definitely against other teams who played the same system. We saw it 2 or 3 times, and United were so much more comfortable. So there is that theory that it can be caught out against these other systems because they're established and evolutionary for that reason. So what do you make of that as a coach? Do you look at him and say, that's a brave move and it can work? Or do you think some evolution, some adaptation from his part is necessary?
I mean, if I look at it from a personal point of view, it was impossible at a grassroots youth football level to have a system that you're wedded to. We would tend to have to fit a system around the players that we've got. But at the professional level, the highest level, you're either going to be a pragmatic coach like Mourinho, or you're going to be someone like a Guardiola or an Amorim, where they are going to have it's going to be their way. And the important thing for Amorim is certainly to have the players to play that system. And for me, as the season evolved last year, as we looked on, what you can see, and certainly I know that, Tony, you've mentioned this, off air, and I know you've tweeted about it as well, where defensively, the way United set up, and I know that you mentioned it, Wayne, before, how much better the defense got in order to, basically by controlling the ball. And one thing that I noticed very, very, what was exaggerated was the forward runs by Euro. How he moves with the ball and he underlaps and he provides those overloads, which then it moves the opposition players around. What do I go or not? Do I sit? If I go, what happens behind? And then that's when you pop the ball off, where you create those overloads, get those balls wide or through the middle where the gaps are. And for me, that was almost the evolution throughout the season, where Euro was he's a young player, new to the club, still very raw, but Amorim certainly trusted him to get the ball, move it forward, move it into midfield. And I think we're going to see more of that this season.
I think that Wayne kind of leads on to one of the screenshots, the last one for my video, not that one, the next one. So you see it there, Euro stepping into space. I think in the system, if I'm going to use my fingers to explain this, so see if you take that away again. So you've got, naturally we've got the three. That one's usually Maguire. So naturally, when we have the ball, or when Manchester United have the ball in an Amorim team, these two centre-backs either side, so that's been Shaw and Euro for most of pre-season, will find that if the other team are playing with three up against them, that there will be that space to step into, particularly when you're playing against teams that will sit off us and allow us to be in their half and have the ball and basically say, right, come and break us down. So you see Bournemouth doing a wee bit of that here. They've got, in the picture, 7 behind the ball. You can see Højlund asking for it early doors, and Euro has the ability to cross from there. Absolutely. What you can see just in front of Euro is Ahmad and Dallo, I'm pretty sure it is. And if you look on the other side, you see kind of what I'm saying about Shaw, number 23 there. So there's naturally, he's wider than the 24 who's marking him. So if that ball was to be brought over to Shaw, either with a direct pass, which would be obviously dangerous in this situation, or through Maguire to him, naturally you'd be able to step forward and engage 24 and then maybe use Mason Mount that's on that side. But in this clip, it goes on for Euro steps in and crosses it. Euro can step in and cross it, but he ends up using Dallo on the side, and Ahmad picks up that wee space, and it ends up being our third goal in that game because Ahmad has come inside the pitch, so he's there, the number 16, and Dallo's out wide. Dallo's fulfilling the role that a winger would have fulfilled in Alex Ferguson's teams or in Mourinho's teams with Solomon Kalou and the likes, and Florent Malouda and Damien Duff, where they would be on the outside of their defender looking for a 1v1. Now, the system is different, but hopefully by having more space for the three centre-backs, because if you think about it there, when Euro steps in, behind him, Maguire comes over, Shaw comes over, and you've got your traditional 2 players in the middle of the pitch protecting a counter-attack. And it's the same on the other side. If Shaw steps forward, or as you see later in the game, Diego Leon has it, and he steps forward, they just shift over. And that's essentially what you see with a back three, is they can fulfill the role of a back four, but they just give up the opposite side. So if that was a back four, you lose the right back, and the ball comes down your left side. Say whoever's playing left wing is too high. Well, Shaw comes across, Maguire comes across, Euro comes across, and you've got 3 players on the same side of the ball protecting it, and that should allow Dallo, Ahmad, whoever's playing on the right wing back to get back in whilst getting pressure to the ball. So for me, Amorim's is far from being behind the times. I would say the way Amorim's system is, and hopefully I've explained it well, is exactly what you'd expect in modern football.
Yeah.
It's controlling central areas, getting pressure on the ball as quick as you can, but also having the opportunity to break forward and have overloads. And my final point on that, Mike, and we've spoken about this, the 3 of us off air, Harry Maguire in a back 3 as the centre-back is the best he's been since he's been at Manchester United, in my opinion. People might disagree. And the reason for that is he's got a guy either side of him. So it makes it, he can focus on defending, keeping it simple, playing to the guy beside him.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I think that the biggest problem with Maguire, particularly in a 3, is his speed at moving the ball. And this might be a goalkeeping problem as well. The time that Onana takes to slow the game down, the time he gets to Maguire, and the knock-on effect that has in the team. So I'm not necessarily blaming Maguire for that. There's a fault, perhaps, or a characteristic of his game. But certainly, I think it's something that's been worked upon, because I think that has been less frustrating as time's gone on. I mean, some people said that they didn't notice anything in terms of evolution. I think that all the signs are there if you see them. I'm not saying they'll all come together. One of the signs that you just mentioned it there expertly there, Tony, about the shift, the way that the team evolves and moves around. Well, one of the biggest issues last season for long periods of time, and it wasn't helped by Ahmad getting injured, was Amorim's tendency to employ either Dalot or Mazraoui at the right wing-back spot and play Ahmad further forward, whereas it seemed obvious that Ahmad's best position was the right wing-back and having someone who could play more attacking in front of him. Now, that seems to be what's going to be the case now moving forward. I don't know how that's going to structure on the left-hand side. You would probably say Dogu and Cunha are the obvious solution at the moment in time. But, I mean, Mike, just speaking, I mean, you can talk systematically about this if you want, but I'm just speaking about individuals here. We know Dalot's flows. We don't know where, or you'll probably still get a lot of game time because he's always available. Mazraoui, possibly less so. It seems to impact one of those two guys. But one of them, they're both fairly durable to get enough games in there as well. But you would still now heavily favour the idea of Ahmad playing that right wing back role and then Bruno in front of him, right? I mean, that's what we've been crying out for, is that kind of dynamism on that side.
Absolutely. I think what we saw last year, and the frustration with less so Mazraoui, but definitely with Dalot, was it all too often they played sideways or backwards. Whereas, because they are defenders, they're essentially defenders. Whereas if you've got Ahmad and Dorgu, who's a far more, they're both far more dynamic, as you said. Their first thing is, I'm going to go forward. Can I move forward? Can I beat my man? Can I play into the centre forward? And then you're playing higher up the pitch much quicker. Whereas, with Dalot and Mazraoui, who are defenders, I don't know whether it's a mental thing or safety first, but the ball kept coming inside more. I think it did evolve over the season. I think you did see them move forward because that's what Amorim wants. But I think it's going to be far more dynamic, it's going to be far more direct with Dalot and with Dorgu on those sides. I think we've seen it already. We've seen already in pre-season. And also you mentioned, Tony, Diego Leon. Straight away, as soon as he came in, he created one of the goals, didn't he? Where he came on into with the ball, went through midfield, took on a couple of players. I know he did stumble, and a goal was created, but it was very dynamic, very direct, but direct with the ball rather than knocking the ball long.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that? I was at the Spurs game last year at Old Trafford when Mickey van de Ven just seemed like he just walked through. But the reason that it looked like that was because he was so quick and so powerful going forward. And I think to the opposite of what Danny Murphy says, in a system that allows you to get the ball forward quickly with runs and forward passes, I think can be very successful in England, because the game in England, much like it is in Scotland, is based around hard work, effort, desire. Maybe it's our tribal heritage where we all wanted to fight each other all the time, and it translates into our football. But if you're a team in England that wants to have 5 passes of the ball before you pass it forward, when you go to pass it forward, you're going to have 11 men to break down.
Yeah.
Because everybody's back in their shape and then ready to jump. So
right.
I think that, in my opinion, and I'm sure if it doesn't go very well, I'll be clipped and have it played back to me saying this. I think the system can suit England, and I think the club's approach, Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada, to signing players that suit dynamic, forward, aggressive, quick attacking football looks to me is promising. But I've been here before. I come out of pre-season, gone to the first game thinking we'll be decent this year, we're going to be good, and then it hasn't really happened for the last couple of seasons. So I'll try and keep my powder dry.
Isn't the introduction of Sesko really important as well? Because if you're going to play the ball forward very quickly, you need someone to be able to hold it up. And how many times did you see the ball bounce off Højlund or Højlund end up on the floor, unfortunately? Whereas, by all accounts and from what we've seen on video clips, Sesko can play with his back, his back to goal. He is stronger on the ball. Therefore, that ball can be moved quicker to him. And we know Mbeumo and Cunha are very good with the ball at their feet. They can manipulate it instantly, go round the corner or pop it off and then spin. And that's something that we never had last season. So if it is Euro moving in, popping the ball, or it goes into the centre forward far quicker, then we can play further forward much quicker.
Aye, Andrew's bang on there.
Yeah, let's get onto this very quickly as well, because this is the final point that we've got on the screen grabs. Before we just have a quick point on the Arsenal game, Andrew there saying he agrees that this system can work. Wish we could rename the wing-back role in this system. That is, for all intents and purposes, what they are. They are wide midfielders in a sense, aren't they? But yeah, I guess you never know. If this system takes off, they will be given new names probably. So it's a point that we made, Tony, about Amad and Mbeumo combining. We've seen the sort of similar things on the left hand side, but what we've seen a lot through Dogu is his ability to break through. Now, there's no refinery in the way that he does anything in the final third, but I think that once you get used to the players around you, your decision making improves vastly. So that should come through maturity and time anyway. But to have someone with the raw ability of being able to penetrate is worth its weight in gold. So you're less worried about the decision making right now, as long as by the time he's used to playing with the likes of Cunha and Mbeumo and Sesko, like we said, that once we get that kind of partnership, what I'm saying is we've got two different avenues. Hamad cuts inside, Dogu's very predominantly on his left. So two players who are predominantly on the left, but it does create a lot of movement in there. And Mbeumo kind of comfortable on both sides. I'm not saying Ahmad's not, but he's more predominantly left-hand sided. So you think, you're not wrong, that the wing-back system, sorry, Andrew, that is going to be very crucial for the success of this system.
It's the opportunity. That wide player is essentially to give you the opportunity to switch the play and create a 1v1. So say for for what Andrew said there, let's just call them the wide player, because it can be two or three different people. Ahmad can go out there, come in, and Mbeumo can go out there. You might even find, and one of my frustrations with Højlund is that Højlund ends up in that space, kind of making it too busy or bringing another defender over, which makes it harder to defend against. So I just think it gives you the opportunity to switch the play, create a 1v1, have players running underlaps, overlaps to run round them. The fashion now is for wingers to play on the opposite side so that they can come in and shoot on their stronger foot. So what you then see opposition defenders being played on the opposite side, so that when that player cuts in, they're defending with a stronger foot. I mean, there's so many nuanced things in modern football, but ultimately it still comes back to, can you beat your man 1v1? Can you get help round about your teammates to make it a 2v1? And can you then create an opportunity to score? And I think, to go back to your point, Mike, Sesko strikes more fear into a centre-back than Højlund does, because the body of evidence with Højlund is that if the ball's played into his feet and the defender gets tight, it's bouncing off him. You have to get in there, and you know that if you get tight, he's got the pace to hurt you behind, but he needs the ball to do that. So if you've got him in front of you, great. I think this Sesko guy is going to make a defender go, whoa, I'm just going to give him a yard and I'm going to take a step back, because if I get too tight and he rolls me, maybe he slips it to Cunha, maybe he slips it to Mbeumo, maybe he drops it to Bruno, who plays wide from there or shoots. So I just think he's a real key signing. But I think it's clear to see what the strategy is this year. More goals in the team, more energy in the team, and a wee bit more fear to play against.
Yeah. Could hardly be fewer goals. Mike, Arsenal on Sunday. It's going to be a difficult one to preview, so that's why I decided instead of going leading with a preview, we'd talk more about the system and its features. So I feel like, I said this on the main pod on Monday, there's probably going to be a fair bit of chaos. You're going to have all these new players for either side. The heat in Manchester is going to be, by all accounts, it's going to be warm again, which is, it seems like an odd thing to say, like it matters, but it does matter in Manchester, because if it's warm and it's not raining up here, United aren't used to that. So, it can have that feel of a pre-season friendly. But, Arsenal, the one thing that they do have going for them is they probably developed a greater mentality of eking out results. Not massively great. We've seen what happens when it starts to fall away, that there's still that old fragile mentality still there, but not at the start of the season. I think they're quite strong when it comes to that. So I think that's probably where Arsenal have got their advantage, through the familiarity that they have got and the confidence and momentum that they've got from the way that they played last season, whereas United are kind of, and again, this isn't any sort of thorough tactical analysis by any stretch of the imagination, but United are kind of playing into that chaos theory if they want to win, right? I mean, Amorim will be probably urging system, but our best chances of winning are probably through that chaos theory, in much the same way as it was when, you remember the game we played when we just signed Casemiro and Anthony scored. It's nothing that was great tactically, like Tony was saying, in terms of identity under Ten Hag, but it was a win nonetheless, and it's that kind of environment that we'll be looking for on Sunday.
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, we know that Arsenal are very settled, but they're a settled squad, a settled team, but they've got new players. Zubimendi coming into midfield, got Gyökeres up top. I'm less fearful of them going forward against United, because I think we are good at the back and we are good at we became better defending. My fear is obviously the goalkeeping situation. But I think the area which is going to be telling, and we know that, games are won and lost in midfield, is whether, Bruno goes wandering. And if it creates a gap, then you've got Declan Rice, you've got Odegaard. If we've got Saka one-on-one on one side, then that's going to create the overloads in Arsenal's favour. So for me, it's the middle of the park, which is going to be very key. If we can shore that up, if we can ensure that that those gaps don't exist, then of course we've got a great chance. You've got Cunha and Bumo. Hopefully Šeško can get a goal on his debut. But I'd be happy with a draw and a good performance, and to see us evolving the system that we're trying to play. But that area does worry me, the central midfield. Declan Rice had a really good season last year, and an addition of a Spanish international, Zubimendi, who's a good player as well. I think that might be an area where I think Amorim may have to tweak something, may have to do something to counter that in order to get a result.
Andrew with a nice comment there. Thanks. Hopefully we'll be doing this every Wednesday. Enjoying this with the guys tonight. Tony, it's right. I mean, I can sort of make it into a bit of a farce, but it's not. It's still one of 38 games where it's going to be serious business, and United are going to need to win. And Mike's quite right. I mean, it's sacrilege to sort of mention Bruno Fernandes's bad points, but it did play a part in the Europa League final as well, when he conceded possession and it led to the goal. And it can be the difference in games like this. You've got a player who can take chances. I don't know. I mean, we missed a chance tonight. We'll talk about it on a later podcast about if Šeško doesn't play, a possible revolving five in midfield where Bruno's less of, let's say, a liability in possession because he tries the unexpected. It's a tough one, right? Does Amorim look at this and say, for this game, I'll play Bruno further forward and try and pack the midfield?
Potentially. One advantage there is that everybody knows how Arsenal are going to play and what they're going to try and do. Bruno plays like the best kid in the street when you were younger. He wants the ball. He's everywhere. He wants to pass for you. He wants it for the goalkeeper. He wants to score the goals and make the tackles and take the throw-ins and take the corners. That's just Bruno, how he is, and he's always been like that. The key, like Mike says, with Zubimendi and Rice in there, Bruno can't do that because they are an Odegaard potentially, and you can keep going. they've got so many players that can hurt you, and you really don't want to leave, let's presume it's Casemiro, in the back three, exposed to runners inside, runners round them, runners behind them, really overloaded. So perhaps Bruno has to put the sword and shield down and play the game with his head a wee bit more, which is all right for me to say sitting in my house. Bruno Fernandes is probably, has been our best player for the last 5 years, and has obviously just won another tournament with his country, won a tournament with his country, and is probably my favourite player right now. But like you said, he can get too involved in everything, and perhaps, I don't know who the options are. I think obviously all the chat right now is about Baleba at Brighton. You really do need a midfielder that can join the two. So let's say it's Casemiro and Bruno. You've almost got Casemiro needs to sit and block passing channels. Bruno needs to be in and around the middle of the pitch, breaking lines, picking up pockets, and turning and getting at people and threading passes and hitting shots. You need the other midfielder or another midfielder probably to join the two of them up. And I don't know if we have that. So it will be very interesting to see how Sunday goes, and how we cope with that. Don't get much a harder game than Arsenal.
No, yeah, exactly. Especially to open the season as well, when they've got a couple of players and they'll be up for it. They always are at Old Trafford. But Bruno's a great player. Like I said, best kid on the street. And in a funny sort of way, we sit here and we're talking analytical, trying to do the best that we can with it. But he's kind of the antithesis of that, isn't it? And we love that as well. That's the point of United. You want to sit, I want to be here next week saying, well, what rubbish. We all talked about Fernandes because he did something that was off the cuff and brilliant and won the game 1-0, and that kind of genius that you can't legislate for. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. There's points I want to talk about throughout the season, including, for example, the comment Almar Broader made over the summer about it being a system, not a formation, which I think is an interesting sort of phrase terminology. So we'll talk about that with Tony at a later date as well. So just want to say thanks for everyone who's watched tonight, who's listened back on the audio podcast as well. Hope you enjoy this. If you can give us feedback as well, give us a rating on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, or to us on Twitter. You can see Tony's handle, you can see mine and Mike's as well when we share the pods as well. So would really appreciate to know what you think about it. That's it for the first episode of this one, guys. Phil, Lee, and Keane will be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and have a great evening.